What's going on, folks? Nate here at Two Wheel Dyno Works. Obviously, I'm not in the dyno room. I'm actually sitting at my desk in the back corner of the shop here because I want to go over with you guys what we have learned on our new R9 since we've been last racing it over the weekend at Portland International Raceways with Wimmer and Omra. Now that we have both the Ram Air installed and the Superbike head and V1 cams from our friend Chuck Giacchetto over at Giacomoto, which is the 140 horsepower on pump gas package that we showed you guys the last time that we went ahead and covered the R9 in a video on our dyno. So there's quite a bit to cover here when we look at the data from this last weekend at PIR, and I'm just going to dive right into it. First things first, the bike is way faster than the last time we raced it out there. We were doing about 159, 160 mile an hour almost, depending upon if Mark was in a draft or not, down the straightaway, which is massively faster than the last time we raced it out there, which was only with one of the 125 horsepower engine packages that we've shown you before in a previous video. And here's what that looks like when you're actually looking at the data in terms of raw mile an hour. Down the straight, that is a whopping 8 mile an hour difference. Down the back straight, it is the same 7-8 mile an hour difference. It's just literally more everywhere down the straightaway because the bike just makes so much more power now that it can just push you through the air that much faster. So from that standpoint, last weekend was a huge win. That engine package kicks ass. 140 horsepower on this bike is fucking awesome. But we weren't all sunshine and rainbows when I was reviewing the data. Instantly when I was reviewing this, I went ahead and noticed that when I was looking at the AFR log, all of a sudden we are seeing much spicier AFR now with the Ram Air effect in those upper 150 mile an hour ranges than we last saw at the Ridge Motorsports Park. And some of that I expected, but I was not expecting to see a 13.6 to 1 AFR go down the straightaway. That's pretty spicy and not recommended. In full disclosure, what happened was that when we last had the Ram airbox out there at the Ridge and I was logging AFR, the airbox was not perfectly sealed. I'm not going to get into too much more detail than that, but we did find that there was a portion of the airbox that was not perfect when it came to an air seal. So we weren't actually generating nearly the Ram air effect that I was hoping to see, or that we really should have been generating, because a lot of that pressure was just leaking right out the airbox. Which is why if you saw our last video when we were racing it out at the Ridge, I was talking about how much the Ram Air really just didn't matter, which it kind of didn't below 140 mile an hour, but we definitely would have been seeing something, now looking at the data here, had the box actually been properly sealed up, which it is now, and how we raced it at Portland this last weekend. Because this last weekend, even right about here, so when you're going down the straightaway, which is still about 140 mile an hour, which is where we were topping out at the Ridge, you're still seeing like 13.6 to 1, which is not good. So that means that we were actually seeing the thing lean out about 5% compared to how I last had it on the dyno, because I did just go back after that last video at the Ridge where I thought the Ram Air was doing nothing and just re-statically adjust the fuel mapping for what we were seeing on the dyno, and it ended up being about 13.6 on the track. Had it at 13.1 on the dyno, saw it at 13.6 on the track, and that's a pretty big jump in airflow that I was just simply not expecting to see. So after I saw that on the qualifying sessions from Friday's data, I did call up Mark, our rider, and say, hey, I am seeing some stuff that I don't really want to see, not trying to burn this thing up. Let's find some higher octane fuel to throw in this thing. So we go ahead and just kind of add a little bit of a buffer here and just race the rest of the weekend, have a blast. So what we did is we threw in some T4 Plus. And T4 Plus is one of VP's more mild fuels. It is actually allowed for the spec fuel in the Super Hooligan series at Moto America because it's 98.5 octane and about 5.9% oxygen or so. And yes, it's oxygenated, so you do get some additional power from that, but the 98.5% octane pretty much guarantees the thing ain't gonna detonate below like 14 to 1. And with that oxygenated race fuel in place for the races themselves, you can actually see that it leaned out even a little bit further than it was on the pump gas. 13.7 is not what you want to see it ever at wide open throttle on an internal combustion engine, but because it is 98.5 octane, it was still perfectly safe. The bike ran just fine. Mark still ended up winning on Sunday and taking second place on Saturday to Andy DeBrino, and that's one hell of a result. But had we not had access to something like that higher octane race fuel, I might have considered pulling the plug on the weekend after looking at the AFR data, because 13.61 AFR at wide open throttle on pump gas, especially on now a higher compression engine, is just not okay. So that lesson aside, the weekend was still a resounding success. The bike's fast as fuck. Mark still went ahead and took second on Saturday, as I said previously, and first on Sunday. And the only reason we took second on Saturday instead of being on the top step of the podium is Andy DeBrino showed up on one of his Triumph 765s. The guy's a high-level Moto America racer, folks. In the Super Hooligan Series, he actually now holds the track record out at the Ridge Motorsports Park on one of these Triumphs. And even with that, we were still able, when Mark could get in a draft behind him, to pull right up and around him with the power that our R9 makes, even when it's running leaner than optimal. Now that clip was from qualifying on Saturday morning, and yeah, Mark was able to get around in there for a couple laps, but like I said, Andy's fast as fuck, so when he decided to put his head down and put his qualifying lap in, he did get around Mark through some of the more technical corners, and away he went.
Nice pass, Andy. Come on, Tony, Andy, Tony.
On Saturday and won on Saturday, but on Sunday Mark walked away from everybody else on the grid. Andy decided not to race that day, so we got our second and got our first, and we're still locked down really in the points at this very moment for the 750 class. I'm not sure anybody could mathematically beat us at this point throughout the series, but we still have Pacific Raceways coming up next weekend, so we're not stopping here with the development of the bike. I'm still trying to push this thing further forward. We still want to go faster. There's still stuff for us to do this season, so we've gone ahead and decided to spend a late night here with our R9 on the dyno in there, because we've been doing some additional testing to see if we can eke out just a little bit more power without having to tear back into the engine. So what I've got on the bike now is our Spark Force exhaust system. I ordered this thing months ago, and finally, it showed up. Now, I went with the Force muffler specifically because I wanted the additional pipe length. I knew we were going to try this out on one of our sort of later iteration engine builds, which this thing really is now that we're 140 horsepower to the tire on pump gas, and oftentimes that little bit extra pipe length makes some more power. So that, combined with the very, very lightweight titanium system here, it is definitely lighter weight than the Acura, I was hoping to see some additional performance over what the Acura has been able to provide. There's two lines there on that dyno graph, folks. I won't even bother telling you which one is which, because they're literally the same. The fuel trims I've had to make from one system to the other are inconsequential. You're talking like 2% or less. So the Acura and the Spark header design, regardless of the muffler you put on the Spark system, literally flow the same. Because for all intents and purposes, the Spark system is exactly the fucking same as the Acura when it comes to performance. Which, I'll be honest, was not exactly what I was looking to see. I was really hoping that the Spark would outperform the Acura at least a little bit, because it costs like nearly twice as much money as the Acura. Now yes, it is made out of titanium, it's stupidly lightweight, so we'll probably still use it for that reason, but just the little bit more power I was hoping to find with the Spark versus the Acura simply doesn't exist. From an airflow standpoint, for those of you looking at buying one or the other, they're literally identical. Get whatever one you like the look and sound of the most. If you're like us and you're racing at a pretty high level and you're looking to save like 1 or 2 pounds, yeah, the spark system's lighter, so therefore objectively better, but you're probably never going to notice that weight difference. Now, the other thing that's worth bringing up here too is that if the dyno has taught us nothing else on this bike thus far, it is that once you add a ram air intake to it, the airflow on the dyno kind of doesn't matter. It's close. You know, we're under 14 to 1 AFR when we go ahead and statically tune it on the dyno, but as we've just shown you, looking at the data that we saw at Portland International Raceway, you end up significantly higher up into the 13s than you'd really like to see. Now, as I covered in the last video, this is not something that we normally encounter on most motorcycles. The root problem here is that these bikes, the R9s, were never developed to have a ram air intake on them. The stock ECU has no way of handling the additional airflow that you see at higher speeds because there's no gear-based or speed-based fuel compensation tables for ram air. Every other bike out there that has ram air from the factory has those tables in place, and they do a really good job of accommodating for the airflow that they know they're going to see as far as increases are concerned as you're increasing speed down a straightaway. On ZX10s, on R1s, on Gixxer 1000s, everything else that has a ram air kit that I've ever data logged on the track, what you get on the dyno is really close, like within 2 or 3% of what you see on the track in reality, not 5 or 6% off, which is just too much for me to go ahead and be okay with. So that's why this next weekend when we go out to Pacific Raceways, I'm actually going to pack my shit up here out of the shop for the weekend, go out there with Mark, and I'm going to data log it in person on the track after trimming the fueling literally the night before, not even trimming, but just checking the fueling the night before on the dyno so I can see exactly how much leaner we're getting this thing to run when we're out there at Pacific, because we'll be seeing those same 160 mile an hour speeds that we saw at Portland. And once we have that data and I can confirm that it matches up with what we saw at Portland, I can then confidently say that, okay, for those of you that are going to buy this ram air kit, I know exactly how much fuel we need to add based on the specific exhaust system that you're going to be running with this setup. Because right now, while I think I've got a pretty good idea now that we've seen the new data from the Portland races last weekend, I don't really deal in maybes or kindas. I want to be 100% certain. So for those of you following along with the engine build and just sort of series progression of the R9, that's about all I got for you until we get through the Pacific round on August 16th and 17th. We'll be out there that weekend. I'll be doing, obviously, the data logging in person so I can make any kind of field trims or adjustments that I need to in real time while Mark's out there racing. If you have any other questions about getting your R9 tuned, as always, just email us. support@tooldynworks.com is how you get a hold of me directly. I personally answer any and all tech support questions every single day that we're open. We're truly always happy to help, and I can guarantee that you're just not going to find better tuning for this bike literally anywhere else on the planet. Because at this point, not even most of the factory-back teams have done anywhere near the intake and exhaust specific back-to-back testing that we have on these bikes.